Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. In this video, we are going to learn how we can take our API from our local environment and deploy it on Microsoft Azure. So what we are going to do is that we are going to build an API, then we use Docker to containerize everything, and then we push our code to GitHub, and then we use GitHub Actions to deploy our Docker container to Azure Container Registry. So when we deploy our API to Azure Container Registry, then we also deploy it from the Azure Container Registry to Azure Container Instance. So finally, our app then can be deployed on Azure Container Instance, where we can then make an API call. So the Azure Container Registry is basically a place to deploy your container image. So something like Docker Hub. So you can deploy your API to Docker Hub, and then you can pull it wherever you are deploying it. So if you are deploying it on Azure, you can pull it from there. So if it is Azure Container Instance or Azure Container Apps, you can then pull it from there, or Azure App Service. So the first step is to create our API, push it to GitHub, use GitHub Actions to deploy our API to Azure Container Registry, and then with that we deploy it from Azure Container Registry to Azure Container Instance. So this process is going to be very exciting. Stick with me, and then if you are new to the channel, please don't forget to subscribe if you want to learn more about .NET, Azure, Breezer, and everything about software development. And don't forget to like this video and comment, and then share it with others. So to get started, we are going to use Visual Studio today, Visual Studio Code. I have this CLI here where we are going to use. So when you are using Visual Studio, then everything is supposed to be .NET CLI. So we are going to use .NET CLI to create our API, and then with that we can then also open Visual Studio and then add our Docker file, and then trying to push it to GitHub and everything. So the first step is to hit our .NET. So we say .NET new web API. So new web API, and then we are going to give it this as a name, and then the name that we are going to add, we are going to give it a name like this. So the name that I'm going to give it is this name here, Azure Container CLI.net. You can name it whatever you want to name it, and then we hide this. So this is creating up .NET, and you see it's very fast. So we have this, so we can then CD in here. So when we CD in, what we do next is open this with Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code, then we'll open this right here for us. So let's bring in the Visual Studio in here right now. So this is Visual Studio Code right here. Then you can see that we have our minimal API here working. So to check everything, what we are going to do, we are going to run our .NET build to build this API and see that if everything is working, so that we can go ahead and then create our Docker file. So to do that, we say that .NET run. So .NET run, and this will run our app for us, and then you can see that the CLI is running everything. Here is building it, and you can see that it's available on this port. So we can use our tender clients here to make API requests, and default the endpoint that we have is weather forecast. So we just have to go and say that our app is running on port 50. So we're going to say that 5093, that is what. So / weather forecast, and when we make a request, we see that the server was refused. So let's check that localhost is supposed to be 93, right? We make it 92. So 93, and let's hit a request, and then now we are getting a response here. So it means that this API is working perfectly, so we can go ahead and then work with it. So the next thing that we need to do here is that we need to create our Docker file. So we need to make sure that this API, and we are just using the default API that we have in here. If you want, you can, you can use this process with any API that you have. It's going to work the same, but to make everything simple, you can then, we want to use default, API where we have this is the weather forecast. So if you have your API that we have built, you can use the same process and it's going to work fine. So the next thing that we need to do is create our Docker file. So we're going to create a file here. It's a Docker file. So we're going to have a Docker file here. And then the next thing that I'm going to create is normal Docker ignore file. So we're going to create another file. It's a Docker ignore. And I'm going to bring in some kind of Docker ignore files in here. So there is nothing. This is a Docker ignore files. So we have this here. So our Docker file is where we are going to do the magic. So we are going to make sure that this app stands to the form of container. So this is how it works. When you are working on your .NET application, what's happening is that when you run the app locally, it takes in the .NET SDK that you have and it use that to build your app for you. But we want to make it a container so that we can take it everywhere. So with that, we also need the .NET SDK and the runtime and everything. So we are going to specify that in a Docker file, and Docker will pull that from Microsoft for us so that this will be embedded in our image. Wherever we take it, it will be able to run. That is the concept of the Docker file. So this is a basic concept of how the Docker file works. So let's go ahead and do that. So we are going to create. So the first thing we need to do is that we are going to specify certain command here. We see that from. So we are going to pull something from Microsoft. So we say that from. In here we see that MC. So let's make it smaller text here with the MC.Microsoft. So Microsoft, we are pulling in some kind of SDK coming in. So the AI is trying to suggest something for us, but this is not what we want. We basically want to use .NET 9. This is what we have. So our app is using .NET 9. So we're going to see that .9.0. So something like this. And then we're going to say as build. So build here, and then you're going to see that this is going to be env. So this is pulling up this .NET 9 from Microsoft's a certain registry for us. So Docker will pull this image for us here, and then we see that the working directory is up. So the next thing that we need to do is that we copy the ch prot, but what we're going to do is that here we are not going to specify. So we are going to say that copy, and then in here we specify that copy everything. So we copy everything that we are bringing in. So copy something like this, and then the next thing that we need to do is that we need to build, and then we publish and release. So when we get the image, what do? Build and publish, right? So we build and publish a release version. So we are going to do this command of .NET run yes. So what the Copilot is suggesting is right. So we are going to say that run .NET publish, right? So and then release. So this is what we're going to do. So when we get that, we say that we're building the runtime image. So to build in the runtime image, what we are going to do is that we are going to then go and say that from Microsoft. Yes, so this is good, but we just change this. So from, we then bring in the ASP.NET runtime. So we are going to say that we have this 9. Okay, so this is the runtime that we want to use, and then we bring in the work directory as well. And then in here we say that copy from build env /app. Yeah, so this is code. What the Copilot is giving us is right. So we then have this. This is a basic configuration that we are doing for our application, Docker configuration. So if you have advanced way of doing it, this is a basic one, but this will get you going, right? This can help us to build and then deploy our app. Well, Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio has something that we add the Docker file. It's add a bunch of stuff, but I prefer it, make it very concise. We like this. So let's set up some kind of set the environment variable, right? To make the app to make let's say to make the app listing on port 00000 and then 80, right? So that is what we're going to do. So to do that, we are going to say env. So this is, we specify some kind of port, all right? And this is me personal preference of how I want to do it, and now it's going to run on port 80. But when I'm running the app, I will kind of specify certain port that I want. I will map it to. So when you are working on Docker Compose, you can use the network to then map in this to another router, something like that. But this is just a Docker file. We don't have a Docker Compose here yet. So we're going to say that what we want to do in this case is that we have this URL, and then it's going to go to this, and then in here we have this HTTP. We're going to see 0. So 0 dots like this. So let's make sure this is going up. And then we have this 0 here. So let's zoom bit for you to see. So okay, so we have this, and then we're going to hit another 0 like that, and then we hit. So we basically need 4 zeros, right? And then we're gonna see that 80. So this is it. And then when that we expose, so expose the port 80. So we say expose 80. And now finally we have something we call run the app, which is the entry point of the .NET application, right? So we say .NET run, but in here we are going to change it. So we have the name of our app here. So we're going to bring it, make sure that the end is the name of your app. So we're going to come in here, and we're going to see that this is it. So this is what we want. Make sure not to get a lot of space in there. Okay, so this is it. So this is basically a basic Docker configuration that we have done in here. This is helping us to containerize this application, turn into a Docker image, so that we can then put it into GitHub. So the next thing that we want to do at this point is that we want to stop this application, and then we want to build our Docker image. So we're going to say Docker, and there is something that we need to do, Docker build. So Docker build, and then we're going to have this T. So the project we want to build at this point is this project. This is what we want to build. So we're going to copy this, and then when we bring it here, make sure not to make it capital letters. So everything here should be small, right? So let's go and make sure this is small. So we don't have uppercase. Everything should be lowercase. So D I C A. So if your application contains some kind of uppercases, make sure to turn everything to a lowercase. If not, you're going to get some kind of error. So now we have turned everything. So let's check it out if it will run. So let's go top like that. Let's hit enter and see that it will require. Okay, so one thing that we need to do is that we forgot to do is that when we are done like this, we need to hit in some kind of dot at the end, and then this is going to build the image. So fail to do that, invalid reference. So there is some kind of invalid reference where we did this as .NET 9. So instead of that, well, let's go to top. So okay, in here should be like this, right? So that we make sure that this is .NET 9. So we made a mistake, right? So we made a mistake. So this is supposed to be like that. So we fix that. Let's go back and run the application. Let's see if it's gonna build. Another mistake is coming in, that from here there is still a mistake coming in, because this is supposed to be an SDK, not .NET Core. So that is one downside of the SDK. So SDK. Okay, so we are putting in the SDK instead, not ES. Here is where we put in the ASP.NET Core, right? So now let's go back and check our Docker firewall, because we have made some changes. So what we did, the copilot suggested we did not read this well. So the point is that we have Docker .NET SDK coming in as a first thing that we're going to pull from Docker, right? So that is it. So let's go and run the application again and check if it's going to run. Let's put the terminal down small. Okay, like that. And let's go back in here. Let's hit. Now it's building. So we get another internal error. Is saying that build runtime ASP.NET Core. So the .NET Core is also giving us an error here. So instead of, we also bring in core here. So let's forget that. So now this is it. Make sure not to bring any core here. So that was the mistake. So let's go and then build the application again. Let's see if it's gonna build. This time around it's building. So this is going to build a complete image for us to use. So it's building, and this is a small application, so it's going to build very fast. Now everything is built. So let's go here. So you can check it. This is a Docker desktop. So make sure that you have your Docker desktop installed. So if you don't have your Docker desktop, you won't be able to run this application. And then you can see that this is pulling in the source. So this is pulling in the .NET 9 coming in, right? So this is .NET 9 coming in. There you can see the size. We can go to the source. So this is our Docker file, and this is what we have in our code. And then you can check the logs and everything. So this is what happened. It was pulling in and whatever happened. So this is also one best features, or one thing about Docker desktop that you can use. You can use it to also view all these things. So the goal is to push this to GitHub. So now we have built an image, and the reason why we are building an image is that, let's take this scenario. When we build the ASP.NET Core app on our local machine, when we run it, it's picking the SDK, the runtime and everything from our local machine, because we have already installed .NET, and then use that to build our web API. So when we built it initially, when we built our weather forecast API, you see everything was running. But in this case, we want to put this into a container, right? So that the goal of container is to put everything to a certain container so that we can use it everywhere. So if you are using Linux, if you are using macOS, as much as you can run Docker, you can run our application. So it shouldn't be we can run it only on Windows. But in this case, we want to have the runtime and everything in the container so that everything will build together so that we can run it. So for us to run our application, we need the runtime and SDK, right? So that is why we are building it. So we have put the SDK and everything from Microsoft, and then we have it on our local machine. So that is the concept of the image right here. So now that we have this working, the next thing that we need to do is we are going to see that Docker run. So we can change this command, and I'm going to say Docker run. So let's go and clear this so that we have a clear terminal to work on. So now we are going to run our application. So we say .NET. So we're going to say .net. Docker is Docker instead, right? Forgive me. Docker run. Then you see the P, right? And I specify the port. So I'm going to make sure that I'm running this on port 2020 like that. And then you see we map this to 80. So we used to have this. So this is what we are going to run. And make sure that this time around we are going to make it small letters again. So this is the application we want to run. So let's go here and let's make everything here lowercase again. So make sure that the D is now going to be so CID, which is all lowercase a, and then we are going to have another E coming in like that. Let's run the application. Unable to find the image looker. So there is an error coming in. Okay, so it's saying that we won't be able to find in that image, but we have the images. So let's run this one. We made a mistake, and this is going to give us invalid. So this is what we want. We basically want this. So maybe we made a mistake. So this is let's copy this, and now when we hit, so check the name very well. So we see that docker run. So docker run P like that. Docker run P like that, and then we specify the port. So now I'm going to bring in the real name here. Let's run this. So this is going to run because initially we were mixing the name, right? So now this is running on port 8080. We can then go and say that it's running on port 2020. So let's go to our here. Now let's change the port to 2020. First of all, let's make a request, and you see that we are getting an error. But this time our Docker is running. So we have closed our local, the one that we were running on local host. Our local machine. Now we are running the Docker image. So now the local image, we specify 2020 against the port 80. So we are going to say 2020. Let's hit request. Boom, it's running. So it means that now our Docker image is running, our API is running on port 2020, which we specify in here. So let's see something. When we make a request here, you see that this was hit, right? So that is it. So now we have this working. And the next point is that we will have to make this one a GitHub repository. So I'm going to create a GitHub repository, and then we push this one inside. So I have this repo that I want to use. So this is basically a GitHub repo. So we are going to make sure that our app, that we have on a local environment will be available here on GitHub, so that we can then start our GitHub action. So what we're going to do is that we are going to then say that we are going to copy all of this command. So we are going to copy all this command here. Let's go back to our Visual Studio here, Visual Studio Code, and let's paste this one here. So this will then try and do everything for us. So we can paste in everything. So okay, so what we're doing is that we need to basically init this. Okay, so let's hit so git initialize this. So when you initialize it, then we can then go ahead and then put everything, and then it will go. Okay, so we are getting an error coming in saying that. Okay, so let's use this. I don't know what git is trying to do. So let's use this format. Basically, don't do it like this, but I want to do it like that right now. You paste in here the command, everything, and then the remote origin already exists. So let's see git status here. and say git add, and then we see git commit test, right? Let's see that everything is test like that. So then let's see if we push, it goes, right? So let's push git origin main and check if everything will go. So now we have been able to create a repo. So this is the format I use. It doesn't matter. The goal is to get this here on GitHub. So we have this in here. So this repo is now available in here. So one thing that we can do is also bring in some kind of git ignore or something like that. It's something we did not specify, but it's okay. The goal here is to get this to GitHub. So we can create in git ignore file here. We can create a new file, put in some kind of git ignore. So if you want, you can say git, and then you bring in ignore. So git ignore. Okay, so we need to have ignore. Okay, git ignore. So then you bring in a lot of things in here. So this is just like that. So now we have our application here on GitHub. The second thing that we need to do is to create our Azure container registry, so that we'll be able to add some kind of configurations here. So the next thing is that we're going to launch our Azure here, right here. We have our Azure here. So what we are going to do is that we are going to search for, you can search for Azure Container Registry, which is very easy. So let's go and say for container. So when we get container, so, or we can search for registry instead. So this is a service that we are getting it from. So you can see container registry. So we are going to create this, and then you can use a lot of formats to create this. You can create this using what we call bicep. You can use Terraform and everything. The goal is to create a resources on Azure. So with this one is a basic stuff. We are just using the Azure portal to create this. So I already have a resource group, I guess. So yes, I have a resource group. So the app name here, we are going to come in and then maybe bring in this name or something. Let's go to here, to our Docker file. I think we have this name. So let's specify this name. The name doesn't matter. You can give it any name that you want, but I'm going to give it the same name so that it will sound good. So this will pick in the azure.io, right? So this will pick in the azure.io, so we are going to do the pricing plan. You can have the basis. The basic is there, the premium is there. So I'm going to go for the standard one. So the next one is we go for networking. So private access is available only in pricing plan. So as much as we have the basic or the standard one, maybe there is a lot of things that we cannot do. So we go for the default one, and this is going to create for us. So let's go ahead, and then we're going to hit review and create. So we are creating our first the Azure Container Registry, so that we'll be able to push what we have on GitHub, our image from GitHub, and then we're going to push it here. So let's hit create, and this is going to create something wonderful for us. It's going to create our registry for us. So it's creating it, it's trying to deploy these resources, and then with that we are going to copy some keys, and then we push it into the GitHub action variable or something like that. The deployment fail. Okay, succeed. Initially we were getting fail, by now it succeed. So let's go here. Now we have this container working. So we have this overview, and this is very nice. So we have the login server. and then we have the location, the resource group, and then we can see my subscription ID and everything is here. So there is a lot of stuff that we may need to make sure that our app runs successfully, which is our register name, our login server, and then we are going to have in some kind of password, right? So some kind of username is going to be hit in here. So we are going to also have our password. Then we are going to add these things into, so make sure to add the admin user so that we'll be able to have access to this thing. So we are going to go to the GitHub. So let's go back to GitHub before we even do the actions. So let's go to GitHub right now here. And then what we are going to do is that we have to make sure that we have this keys or access keys stored in our GitHub action variables. So we can go back to GitHub right now, and then in here, so you can go to settings here, and then in settings, so let's start. This is the repo that we have in here, and then we want to add a certain action variable so that Azure can use it, right? So whenever our GitHub action is pushing something to Azure, it use that one to verify. There is different ways to do this. So you can use something that we call the Azure credentials, where you have a way of having that credentials in here, and then to use that one to log into Azure and push everything. So I'm going to use just a simple one here. Based on your subscription, you can do that, but the subscription I have, I'm going to use it this way, and which will fit in. So let's go to settings here, and then you can see we have something called secrets and variables. So we're going to click actions. So what we are going to do is that we are going to add action. We are going to add action security. So repository security and an environment variable. So let's go and add the repository security here. And the first thing that we want to add is the Azure register server name, which we already have it. So we are going to write it in caps. So let's write it in this way. So Azure no. So let me bring this one in here. So this is what we want. So we have Azure register login server. So this is what we have here on our GitHub. So this is the login server. This is it. So we are going to copy this, and then we are going to paste it in here. So let's go back to here. We are going to paste in. So this is the login server. So when you create it, and then you go to access key. So after creating your Azure Container Registry, so you can go to security and then you'll find this. So this is the login server, and then we are going to save that. So let's go ahead and save this. So GitHub is going to store this. So now we have this login server in here. So we are going to bring another one, which is the password. So let's do the same. I'm gonna add a new one. So repository security, and then we're going to see that the registry password, which is this one. So we can show the password like this. We copy the password. So we have the password coming in. So we have the password coming in, and then we paste this one. So now we have our server, we have our password. And we are going to use this in our GitHub action so that GitHub will be able to log into the Azure, because we have the credentials in here, and use that one to access Azure and then push everything inside for us. So the next thing that we want to do is that we bring in the registry username. So the registry username. So let's go ahead and create a new repository security. Then let's paste this registry username, and when we go in there here, what is the username? So the registry username, this is the login server, So this is the username, right? So we have the registry name and we have the registry username. So this is the username that we want. So we're going to copy that and then we're going to paste it in here. So basically we have this 3 thing here. So it's supposed to be 3. The register, the registry login server, the registry password, and the username. So now the next thing for us to do is go in here and create our GitHub action flow here. So let's go back here and create our GitHub action flow. So what we are going to do is that in here we are going to create another folder, but we are going to call it something like this, GitHub. So let's create a folder and call it GitHub. So let's delete that. Let's delete it. Okay, let's create a folder. This is not a file. So a folder and call it GitHub. So let's call it GitHub. So we have this GitHub we are going to work with. So now our Docker is running. Our GitHub is, we have created our Azure Container Registry. So the next one is have the GitHub action that will push this image into the container registry. So that is what we're going to do. So to do that, we are starting up, and then we are going to say that in here we are going to create another folder. In here we are going to say it's workflow. So we are creating a workflow here. So workflows, right? Something like this. So this is the workflow we have. And then we are going to have one workflow, which is main.yaml, right? So basically GitHub action is structured in a YAML file. So we are going to create that. And the first thing that we need to do is give it a name. So we are going to give it this GitHub action a name. So the name is to run, let's say run Docker push, something like this. And I see that AC Azure Container Registry, something like this. So we are getting an error. Why there is an error? Because when we have this, we need to have in. So let's see on. We are specified that on. So if we want this to be triggered, what we do is that on push. So we go in there and say that on push on the main branch. So whenever there is push in the main branch, so even we can have other branch that will make a pull request. We can do that one here if the pull request coming in, but we are just making it, when there is a push to the main branch, run this, actions, right? So it's listening to push on the main branch. So that is it. So we are getting an error here. The syntax missing job, right? So we don't have a job yet. So the next thing that we want to do here is we want to run a job. So we're going to specify jobs. So the job is what is this action is going to do. So we are going to define jobs. So what do we want this to do? Jobs, right? So first of all, we are saying that listing to push on the main branch, but to do this job is what we want you to do. So this is trying to, the GitHub Copilot is trying to suggest everything for us, but let's write our own. So we're going to see jobs. So when we get the job, what we want to do is that we want to basically bring in this. So the job we want you to do it on this. So the name of this action. So the job is running this action. So we have already given it a name, and the job is running this action. And then, so when it's doing that, we want to have a name for this. So we're going to see that if you are doing this name that we want to give to this is that run Docker build. So run Docker build. Okay, let's spell the Docker well. So run Docker build So, and push, you can give it any name. So whenever the action is running, you see these names coming in, right? Yes, to this to ACL, right? So we have this, and then we see that run on Ubuntu latest. So we want to run this on Linux. The job should run on Linux, right? And it should run on Ubuntu latest. So that is one thing that we want to do. So let me zoom in this so that you see it well. Okay, so we are running this on that Ubuntu latest, and then the environment that we want to run it is that the environment here should be production. So it's a production environment. So because when we hit the main, it should be production. You can have any environment you want. So let's go, and then also have some scripts in here we want to run before we go to the steps. You know, the Copilot is giving us a steps, but let's go ahead and see that we want to have default, right? So default, some kind of bash script, right? So the thing is not, arranged properly for us. Okay, like, so now one important thing is also the steps. So what step do we, so we can have a lot of steps, and so it's run, move from these steps and go to the steps. So now we have these jobs. The job is running on production, is running on Ubuntu latest, which is Linux. So the next thing that we want to do is the steps. So let's go and have what we call steps. So the step and the runner to, so here is steps. So we're going to have what we call steps. So steps. And then the first thing that we want to do in the step is that we want to, first of all, we give it a name. So we are giving this step a name. So the first step that we are giving it checkout code, but we can give it a better name. So let's say that checkout repository, check repository. So let's spell it well. Let's check the response. So checkout repository, and this is the step, the name that we are giving to this step. So, and then we want to make sure that the action we are using is for, right? So the action we want to use actions is for, and then we want to log into Docker, right? So we are seeing that name, we are having another step, which is another name. So we're going to see that, okay, let's have this name, and the name here is that we are going to say that we then log in Docker login. So something like Docker login, and then in here, or we can say that Azure login instead, because we are using Azure login. So if we check in the action, then we want to go into, then we log in. As I said, we already have, and then the action we want to use. So in here we say that use what we want to use, that we wanted to use Azure /Docker. So we want to use Azure /Docker login, and this is supposed to be one. So this is what we want to use to log in it with Azure, right? And then with the credentials that we have. So when we are logging into Azure, the credentials that we have is one thing that we should make note of. So you see the login server, this is not the name that we give to them. So we give them these names. So the first name is that the login credentials, the login server was this name. So what is going to happen is that it's going to pick this from the GitHub, the environment security, and then use it, right? So that we'll be able to log into Azure. So when you check out the repository, the next thing is we want to log into Azure, because we want to locate this and then we push in the image to that. And the second thing is that we have the username. So we say the registry username. That is one thing we specify. So let's go here and then we do this. And then the second thing that we want to do, so let's make sure we are not adding any spaces. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is the password. So the password is what we want to do. Okay, so password in here. Okay, so this will help us to log into Azure. So now we have our jobs that is going to run on the Ubuntu, and then we have this running the script, and then we have the steps. So the first is check up the repository, use the action for, and then trying to log into Azure for us. So build and push Docker image. So now when we are done like that, another step we want to do is that we want to say that build and push Docker image. So build and push Docker image. So that is another step. So we're going to name this step build and push a Docker image. So the name of this, the name that for this step is build and push. So we are probably we don't want to go for the Copilot suggestion. So we only want to have this. So this is the name for the repo. I mean, this is the name that we want to give to this step, which is build and push. So when the actions run on GitHub, you see all this step. I mean, the name that you specify will show when that step is running. So we build this and then push. So we're going to say that use. So what we're going to say is that we want to use Docker build push 5, right? So we're going to use Docker. So now we are building the Docker image. So now we have logged into Azure. So when we log into Azure, what we normally do is that the Docker file that we have our local, I mean with the local image that we have with our code, we want to build it, right? And then we'll be able to push it into the Azure, I mean the registry that we have where we have logged in, right? So this is a 9 step. So that is it. So let's go ahead and say that, okay, so now we have build and push. So we are going to say that we are adding some kind of stuff to it. So we're going to say wait. So when we build, we are going to say wait, push. So now we build. We want the push is equal to true. So finally we are pushing. Okay, so push is equal to true. And then the tag that we want to use is that we want to use this tag. So we want to use this tag right here called the ASP.NET called implement, but we can then say that this is the tag we want to use. So basically I want to use this tag, login server, and the name of the name that we give. So this is the login server. So what is the name of this thing that we are using? I can use this something like this, which is supposed to be kind of a repository or something. So let me see what tag will be best for. So let's use our app as a tag, right? So let's use the app as a tag here. So let's use our app as a tag. Okay, so this is the tag that I want to use. So we have this tag, and the next thing is that we then specify the Docker file that we want to build. So the Docker file we have in the our machine, I mean with our code, right? So let's going to say the file. So in here is going to be file. So the file that we want to have is that it's already here on the Docker file. So we already have this. So this / Docker file. So this is our project. And then we will go to the action here. We will see that this / Docker file. So we're going to bring in this. If you like, you can leave it like that. So this is basically our action. So this will push everything to the Azure Container Registry so that we can go ahead and create a container instance and pull the image from the container registry. So that, but one thing is that we can also add the container instance to the action so that everything will be automated. You push and then you pull, but you need to do the Azure the credentials on the Azure action. So if you can do that, it's going to be the same format. My subscription does not permit me to do that, so we probably going to do it manually, but you can also do it on the GitHub action. So that is it. So let's go ahead and then trying to push this so that let's see the action if it's going to be deployed. So we see that git add, and then we're going to commit this and see that action setup, right? So just anything. So action setup, and let's push this. So when you push this, okay, git push origin main. So let's push this. So now we are saying that anytime there is a push on the main branch, we want to hit the action running. So let's go to our action, and now you can see the action is running, and the name that is trying to start the job. So running, that is the first name that we gave, and you see it's running the name. So the name that we specify is how it's running. So it runs, so build and push Docker image, and there is an error coming in saying that there is no search file directory. So the Docker file that we specify does not exist, so we should make sure to check it well. So the Docker file we specify does not exist. So let's go to the action is failing, right? Because of this Docker file does not exist. So in here we can use the default one and see something like this, right? So let's try this. So based on how you created it, so me, I am in the default directory, so my Docker file will be located here. So let's try this one too and see if we'll be able to find this. So we're going to see that git add here, and then we're going to see that git comment, and you see that, okay, git comment here, and then we can see git comment. You see adding Docker file, something like this, and then let's see if I change, and let's push it again. So let's push origin main. Okay, push, and now it's going back to GitHub. So let's go, our action will run again. So let's go to this project and let's go back to action. Now the action is running, so let's see if it will find the Docker file. So the error was that it was not finding the Docker file, so the location that we specify. So when it's building, so now it's trying to build building the Docker and push. So the name that we specify, build and push Docker image. So it's building the Docker image and push it, and then push, post and push Docker image. So if it is done, it's now post and push. Now the job is done. Boom. So now the job is done. So when we check here, you see everything is successful. So let's go back to our the container. So the container registry, let's go back in here, check overview. Let's see if everything is working. So now everything will come in here. Let's check the active logs in here. Let's go to the overview. So now everything is seen here. we have it working. So this is coming in. So successful push. So you can see that we push this from GitHub. So this was pushed from successful push count. So you can see this was Azure.net. So everything is here. We have it working. So we thank God that now we have this thing working successfully. So 1 hour, you can see the downtime and everything working here. So that is the overview of how things work. So we can push the container image. So we can push, we can manage, but that is not what our focus is. We can use it with a lot of things, and if you want tutorials. So the goal was for us to monitor and check if it is here. So we have the latest images coming in. So now we have this here, and this is available here. So you see succeed provisions state standard price, right? So you can see that is it. So we can add tags if you want. So the tag that we added, no changes. So this is the tag that we added initially. So whenever we push in this one. So this is how it look like. You can do a lot of things with tokens. So, and then you can do a lot of things in here. So we can check the CLI if you want to do other stuff. But the goal is now we have this working, and we want to go and create another container what we call container instance. So this is a container registry where everything will push from GitHub. We have the container image in here. So we need to have a container instance that will then pull the image from this the container registry that we have. So the container, right? Don't worry, we are going to do another one. So what I'm going to create manually, which you can use GitHub to automate it if you want. If your subscription allows you. My subscription does not allow me to use GitHub to do that. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create something we call Azure Container Instance. So we have Azure Container apps, and then we have Azure Container Instance. So the container instance, let's take it, can deploy one when we have, let's say, one image which we have in Azure Container Registry. We then can deploy it on container instance. But when we have multiple images, let's say we are working on microservices, we can then use something we call the container apps that will help us to deploy a lot of images. So it will help us to deploy. So when you want to deploy multiple images, you think of container apps. If you want to deploy something, a single one, let's say creating something, one image, we think of container instance. So let's create a container instance. On this container instance we are going to create, we are then going to use the container registry. So when you are creating a container registry, container instance, you need an image, right? You need the image, and the image is, we already have image which we have built. We have used GitHub Actions to put it to GitHub, so we are going to use that. So let's select a resource group. So with this one, we can use GitHub to automate this one, and then the name of this, I don't know, let's give it the same name. So let's go and pick our app. So let's use our app name. You can pick any name that you want. So let me go and give it this name, or let's go back to the GitHub. So this is the container name that we want to give it. So there is a difference between the container instance and the container registry. So the container registry, we are saying that, think of something like Docker Hub. We are pushing our image in there. Our image is going to be stored in there. And then when we think of container instance and container app, we are deploying containers. And then before you can deploy container, you need a container image, and you can push the container image to even Docker Hub or Azure Container Registry. And this one, we have pushed it through GitHub Actions into Azure Container Registry. So when we are going for the container instance, we are going to pull it from Azure Container Registry. So that is it. And then this will ask you, if you want to create a container instance, which image do you want to use? The source of the image is the container registry. So the moment you click container registry, it's going to pull what we have. and this is the tags. The images, we have only one image, and this is the tags we have. So we can keep on deploying new tags. So whenever we build and then we deploy, there's going to be a different kind of tags coming in, right? Or type coming in. So it's going to generate a different images, or types. So the tag we want to deploy is the new one. The one that was created for us. So that one. So when we add a new controllers and everything, and we send this up to GitHub, it's going to create a new tags, and we can deploy a new tag. That is one thing you can use GitHub Action to do that. Whenever there is a new tag, we pull it and then we deploy it. So if you can do that, but this is why we are using the portal to do it. But it's the same process, and it can work perfect. So let's go and say review. We are not going to do review and create for now. So I wanted to take you through the process. So the first thing is that you start and you so let's close this. Let's cancel this. Let's go and create it again. So let's create it again. So the first thing is that we select our resource group, and then we give it a name, the container name. We use this, and it says that we are going to use the Azure Container Registry. So if we go for add this, that is where we can specify Docker Hub and everything. So you can see it's giving us a Docker Hub option because that is the most popular one. But we are using Azure Container Registry, so it's going to pull what we have in our Azure Container Registry for us. So that is why we have. It's giving us the latest tag, which is what we have deployed latest. So this is it, and then we go for networking. So networking. Here you can specify that we see already is port 80. Remember when we were doing it, we specify port 80, and everything is public, right? So everybody can access this. So that is it. Let's go for next. This is monitoring. It's trying to give you this, so you don't need to do everything here. So on failure restart policy, this is everything is set up for you. You can create a tag, so we can go to previous. And then you see it's very easy. So it's picking everything, it create everything for you. Here you don't need to do anything. So everything will be configured for you. So here you don't need to add any resources. So if you want, you can do the multiple one. But what we are doing here is going to be, it's easy for us to do. So we're going to hit review and create. And this is going to create our container instance. For us using the container registry. So we're going to, that image that we have built and push into GitHub is going to use it. So after deploying it, we can then make API calls, right? Then using this container instance is very easy to do that. So we are creating it. So we are trying to deploy this container instance, and let's see if everything works so that we can then use this to make our API calls. So with a little time, everything will build and deploy. So now we have everything successful. We can go to the resources, and then now we have deployed an API. So we have one API deployed. So one thing that you can notice is that we do not have any public FDSC like that. So this one was something we should have allowed, right? We did not allow that. So we can go back and create these things, or let's see if we can then enable this. So one thing, we can go to containers and check if the container is running. So this is basically the container we have, and everything is running. So we have these things working. So the one thing that we forgot to enable is this. We should have some kind of endpoints here that will help us to. So this is basically the API. So this is the API that is working, but we can then trying to say that we want to delete this. So let's take the process again. If you want, you can modify it, but I want to show you the mistake that we made. We should have specified something, then we refuse to do that. So container instance delete successfully. So let's go and create it again. So we're going to create a container instance, and then we are creating a container instance. So now we are going to use the same image to create a container. We need to have a specified URL that we can use to make an API call. So let's go here, we specify this, right? And then here we are going to use Azure Container Registry and then going to pick everything. So here we don't need to do anything, right? Availability zone and everything. So the container name, let's use the one we used to have, and this is it. So here there is no problem here. We have done this. Let's go to the networking section, and this is port, right? So DNS label, that is where we are going to do some kind of configuration. So let's go in here. When we put it to now, so see what is happening. Public you say that it will create a public IP address for your container instance. It will allow you to choose a new existing virtual network, right? So if we choose this, it's going to allow us to have a public API, but we need to configure this, right? DNS name label. So we want to add something here so that we'll be having a specific URL, for it to work. Is that the thing? So let's go and configure that one right now. What we want to do is that we want to configure some kind of DNS name label. So we're going to push our app here so that it will pick it and then use the Azure URL for us. So what we do is that you can, when you create the app, you can do it, but I wanted to take you back to the process so that you see the mistake that we made here. So this is how it's going to be, and this is going to take in the app and then use it, right? So we're going to have this .myazure.me, that domain, right? So let's go ahead this time around, create, and we are going to have some kind of URL that we'll be able to use to make our API calls. So now the validation is passed, so we are going to hit create, and this is going to create and deploy our Azure Container Instance for us. And this time around, we are going to get some kind of URL, and you can add your custom domain. So you can add your custom domain that will be able to use to make your API calls and everything. So let's say if we are working on clifftech.com, we can have clifftech.com. So you can see we'll be having clifftech.com and then maybe / login user or something like that. You know how that one works. So we are trying to deploy this, and this is trying to deploy. Very soon deploy, and then we can copy the URL, and then when we go to / weather forecast, we'll be able to make an API request, and then we get the weather forecast coming in. So this is very exciting way to do this. When you create, you can add a domain name, but I wanted to take you back, and then we see how we can then specify some kind of DNS label, and then we use that label, and then it will then pick in the Azure URL, and then we have some kind of domain name. So it's not something like it's going to always give you the default Azure URL. You can add your custom domain. So now let's go back to this, right? So let's go to the overview, and now you can see we have this in here. So this is now giving us, so if you want to make a request, this is what we're going to use this DNS, right? So it's very easy to do that. It's very nice. So we can then have this to make our API call. So we are going to make API call in a minute. So we can check, we can see the logs and then see everything. So you can check the container itself and see how it's working. So this is the container that we just deployed. It pull, right? So it pulling, and then pull start. So now it's working. So this is coming from the Azure Container Registry, and then we have it on the container instance. So this is what we have. We have this image, that is the image. So the status right now is that the image is working. So we can have all these things if you want to do multiple configurations or work on multiple stuff. So basically, we can also check the activity logs here based on the subscription that you have. So this is kind of thing. So my subscription was to do all of these things. So this is basically the basic way of doing it. You can do a lot of stuff with this, but this is the basic stuff. So if we are to work on this, we are going to copy this and make an API call very soon. So let's go to our Visual Studio Code right here, and this is it. So let's go to our tender client here. So this was our Docker, right? So now let's make API request, and it's working. So it means that our Docker is still running, our local Docker is running. So let's go and stop that. So we want to make a new API request. So we want to make a new API request using this URL. So now if you want to make an API request, as I said, we have the default URL that was given to us. So we copy this, and then we can come back here, then we paste in this URL. But now when we hit this, it's not going to work. 404 not found. The server is running because we need to make sure that we have this /weather forecast. So we can see that we're going in there and see /weather forecast, and then when we make an API request, it's not going to work because we made a mistake here. So now we make API request, it's working. So now we can see we are making an API request. Let me zoom in for you to see it better. So when this is the URL, so let's do it again for you to see. So now we want to make an API request for the container that we have deployed on the container instance, pulling it from Azure Container Registry. So what we are going to do is that we copy. So anytime we want to make this URL, this fn, so when we search for the fn, do we get something? We don't get anything, right? So it's showing us that our app is running on this DNS, right? So we're gonna copy this, and this is what we specify. So the initial one we did not specify that. So let's go to here. When we paste this, we make an API request. The server will tell us that it can't find anything because we need to do /weather forecast, right? So we have to make sure that we have weather forecast. So let's go and copy weather forecast. So /weather forecast, and then it's giving us this response. Now we are getting the weather forecast. So now we have been able to deploy the app into the Azure Container Registry, and then we have been able to deploy into a container instance. We can deploy it to the container apps. You can deploy it into Azure App Service as much as you have the container running. But this is the basics, something this gives you a fair idea on how to go with the process. You can do a further automation using GitHub Actions and everything. So this is how we do it. And this video, we take everything slow so that you'll be able to get a concept. We made some mistake just for you to learn and then understand that this is how it's going to be. So thank you for watching Cliff Tech, and this is how we do it. The code is going to be available on GitHub so that you can go check the process and then you follow the same procedure. So thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel for more videos on Azure.NET and Blazor. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.